Hello, everybody. I'm Vanessa Udelman. I'm going to be facilitating your leadership program, and I'm really excited to launch Module 1. And in this video, I'm going to cover all the content of Module 1 for you. So let's begin. We'll start with our operating principles. And during the program, it is whatever we talk about is going to be really confidential. So feel free to bring up all of your current leadership situations or issues or real life situations that we can work through and talk about in the program. Share your best practices. I know you all have experiences as a leader, so bring your experiences to the table. Cameras on and implement. We're going to learn a lot of content in the 6-module program. And so your job really is to be able to take away what you've learned from each module and apply it, but more about that in a minute. Okay, so how does the program work? So there's 6 modules in the program, there's homework in between, and it's very interactive. So at the end of each module, what I'm going to ask you to do is select something that you want to do for homework. When we come back to the next session, you'll have an opportunity to go into a breakout with a partner and share what you did for homework. The concept here is not that the homework is perfect. The concept is that you tried something, and then we're going to assess what worked, what didn't, and what you learned from your homework. So this is the leadership reality. Most people get promoted into leadership positions without any training. And so the reason is they're very good at their job, whether you went to university to become a lawyer, to study marketing, to be an accountant, whatever it is, you're really good at your job. And because of that, you get promoted into a leadership role. But the reality is that being a leader requires different skills. It's actually a different job than what you were trained to do at university, at school, at college, et cetera. And so a lot of leaders feel overwhelmed by their leadership responsibilities. And this program is about moving you from that place of overwhelmed, if you do feel overwhelmed, to feeling really confident and giving you the tools and strategies. In this program, I've been developing leaders for over 20 years. And what I've done is really identified what are those core skills, behaviors, competencies, strategies that I know leaders need to be successful. And that's what's in this program. It's very comprehensive. So the goal of the program is twofold. One, I want to dial up your self-awareness, really develop your self-awareness, and give you tools to make it really practical for you. So for example, we're going to look at this from a self-awareness piece. Why do you tend to avoid feedback? And then I'm going to give you a tool to give feedback really effectively. So I'm also going to share a lot of books with you in the program. This is one of my favorite leadership books. It's called The Leadership Pipeline. And why I think it's so interesting is because what it indicates is that at every level of leadership, you actually need to develop new skills and behaviors. So this is the Leadership Pipeline. And it looks at the 6 passages of leadership. So the first level of leadership is passage 1, which is leading yourself. That's when you're an individual contributor. You still need to demonstrate leadership competencies, but when you move into passage 2, that's when you start leading others for the first time. Then you lead other leaders. Then you become a functional leader and a business leader, et cetera, until you're the CEO of your organization. Every passage requires different skills. People don't know that. And that's why when people get promoted into new leadership passage, there's often that feeling of stress and overwhelm. Right? And so the goal within your organization is to have strong leaders at every level. So this slide I love because what it shows you is the specific breakdown of where you need to be spending your time and what skills you need to develop at every level of leadership. And so you can see when you're an individual contributor, you're managing yourself, you've got to get the job done, align with organizational values and culture. Minute you move into passage 2 and you're managing others, that's where you start splitting your time between getting your accountabilities delivered and helping your team deliver their accountabilities. And so that's a very different job. And so that's what the program is about, is giving you the skills to be able to do that and know that you're doing it right and to do it with confidence. Okay, so the program has 3 pillars. When I started my own business, Mosaic People Development 11 years ago, I looked at what are some of the areas that all leaders need to develop. And I literally took sticky notes and I put them on a wall. And I looked at the categories and I realized there's 3 categories. You have to know yourself. That's the self-awareness piece. You have to be able to manage your team, and you have to be able to lead your business. The program is designed to leverage these 3 pillars. So module 1 is know yourself pillar. Modules 2, 3, and 4 in the program are manage your team. And then modules or sessions 5 and 6 align with that, the lead your business pillar. So that's how the program is broken out. In terms of the curriculum, what you're going to get from the program, all of these things here. So again, I've really thought about what are those core skills and behaviors that are critical for you as a leader. You have to know how to give feedback, have those difficult conversations. You're going to feel so much better and more confident to do that after the program. You have to be able to coach. I'm going to teach you how to do that. I'm a certified coach. I'm going to teach you practical skills that real coaches use. You're going to learn how to delegate, develop your team, manage your time, lead change, etc. So it's as you can see, a very robust and engaging curriculum. One of the things that I want you to leave with throughout the program is to be a conscious leader. I don't know if you are aware of Eckhart Tolle. His book called The Power of Now, really, really dense, interesting book. He talks about being conscious of being conscious. So what I want you to do is move to that place where you're consciously leading. You're not sort of bumbling away and kind of making things up as you go along, but you're strategically leading. You've set goals, you understand your priorities, and every day you're coming into work or working online or working virtually in a hybrid model with your team, knowing what your priorities are and feeling confident that you have the skills to achieve them. Self-awareness matters. That first pillar is really important, and you can see the data. This is just one example of the research from MIT Sloan Management Review, that self-awareness impacts the bottom line. Companies achieve better results when their people are self-aware, and that's a reality of the workplace. And that's why we really talk about self-awareness throughout the program, and we start there with pillar 1 in module 1. So, if you have self-awareness, you're really, as a leader, able to lean into your strengths. And today we're going to, through the DISC profile, look at what your strengths are. You're going to have real clarity around that. But you're also going to be able to identify what your weaknesses are. And believe me, every leader has weaknesses, right? But what you're going to be able to do is learn how to mitigate them. We're going to really, with self-awareness, right? You can dial up your communication and trust, and just grow and develop and be more effective at your job, and just be a more effective and happier person overall. Okay, so the second book I want to share with you, and this is honestly my favorite book. If you haven't read it, I would suggest you do. If you're not a big reader, go onto YouTube and just search Carol Dweck. Mindset. It's Carol Dweck's a professor at Stanford University, and for 20 years she studied successful people. And leaders tend to be people who are goal-oriented and driven and want to be successful. And that's why I think this book is so important for all leaders to understand, review, and know. So when you think about this concept here, right? Our life is what our thoughts make it. What does that mean? Well, it means your thoughts become your reality. Whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. And so it's really about being conscious of being conscious. If you think you can't give feedback, oh, I'm just terrible at giving feedback. Well, you're not going to give feedback, but that's not true. Everybody can learn to give feedback. All the aspects we're going to learn in the program are skills that you have to practice and develop. Leadership is like a sport. You can't just go onto a tennis court and play tennis well. You have to learn the skills and techniques and how to serve and forehand and backhand, and then practice. It's the same with leadership. So if you think about all of these areas here, right, I want you to think about which of these do you believe are set in stone and which of these can change. It's interesting because in the work that Carol Dweck does, she says that the reality is none of these are set in stone, right? With a focus on developing these areas and hard work, you can develop in any of these areas. And that's what her book is about. And so having what Carol Dweck calls a growth mindset becomes critical, because the growth mindset tells you that nothing's set in stone. Any of your leadership skills with hard work, you can develop, right? When we have a challenge, so if you're in a fixed mindset, And the goal is to identify when you're fixed and move to growth. We can all be I would say most of us are very growth. We have a growth mindset. You wouldn't be at this point in your career without a growth mindset. So we tend to be very growth in most areas of our life, but fixed in others, and that's normal. And so your goal is think about where, you're set, your mindset is set in stone. That's that fixed mindset, and you want to shift it to growth. And like with feedback, for example, you can hear, you can see it here. If you get defensive when you have feedback, then you're just taking it personally. Shift to growth mindset. Say, oh gosh, I'm fixed about this. I need to be growth. I need to think, okay, how is this useful? And how will this feedback help me develop, even if it does hurt my feelings? So we're going to talk about fixed and growth mindset as the program progresses. But again, the goal is, where am I fixed, and how do I need to move to growth? How can I change my perspective? And realize and remember, nothing's set in stone. Okay. And so the key phrase that we use is not yet. I'm developing my ability to delegate. I'm not yet there, but I'm working on it. I'm developing my ability to give feedback. I'm not yet there, but I'm working on it. My team members, I'm delegating to them. And you know what? They're not yet there either, but I'm helping them grow, and I know they'll grow over time. So not yet is one of those phrases that's so key to having a growth mindset. And then the last thing I want to share with you around growth mindset and fixed and growth mindset and Carol Dweck's work is just to think about and reflect, take a minute to reflect on what's an area where you're fixed right now, and how can you shift to being more growth, right? Is it a skill or ability around your leadership? Do you tend to be a perfectionist? If you are, I really suggest you read this entire book, Growth Mindset by Carol Dweck. Is it around a relationship? Is it maybe fear of success or failure, or need to be a control freak? I'm a recovered control freak and a recovered perfectionist. That's why this book changed my life. So I can really relate to both of those areas. Okay, so let's move now into the DISC profile. And when we go through this together, if you do have page 4, 5, and 6 printed, that would be great. You also, in your Learning Hub, will have a workbook. So we're going to be referring to 2 documents, 1, the workbook, and 2, your DISC profile report. Okay, so let's look at your style. So I want you to draw a line on a piece of paper, and I want you to put yourself somewhere on this continuum. Where do you see yourself? Do you see yourself as fast-paced and outspoken, or cautious and reflective? Then I want you to draw a line going this way on a piece of paper. And again, put an X somewhere on this line, on this continuum. Do you see yourself more as questioning and skeptical, or accepting and warm? Okay, so based on that, you're going to be a D, I, S, or C. D's tend to be questioning and skeptical, fast-paced and outspoken. I's, fast-paced and outspoken, accepting and warm. S's, accepting and warm, cautious and reflective. And C's, cautious and reflective, questioning and skeptical. And the wonderful thing about the DISC profile is there's no good or bad, right or wrong. Your style is your style. And the other thing that I really like about the DISC profile is that no style is good or bad, right or wrong. And we're a combination of all 4. That, right? If you look at all of these descriptors of D, I, S, and C, you're going to resonate with areas in each of these, right? And so that's the truth. We're all a combination of all 4, but what the DISC measures are your tendencies. So you tend to be more of one than the other. So that's it. Okay, it's just about your tendencies. So what I'd like you to do is go to your DISC profile report. On page 2, you can read some of these cornerstone principles. Again, take a look at the overview of the DISC model. And the most important thing to realize is all DISCs are equally valuable. There's no good or bad, right or wrong. I've seen excellent leaders with every DISC profile. Okay, so let's go to page 3, and I want you to look at your dot. Where your dot is matters. So it'll be in what I call one of the pieces of the pie here. This dot is in I. So this person is clearly an I. Okay, so where your dot is matters. What do I mean by that? If your dot's on the outer edge of the circle, it means you have a strong inclination towards that area. So this person has a strong inclination towards all of those characteristics that are aligned with being an I. This person has a moderate inclination to being an I and this person a slight. So if your dot's close to the center, what it means is that you tend to move into DISC a little more readily than someone whose dot is on the outer edge of the circle. They tend to stay within that I place or DI place or SC or CS place more. Good or bad, right or wrong? Nope. It's just understanding your work style. And DISC is not your personality. Your personality comes into it, but it's really your work style. Okay, so let's review your style. So what I'd like you to do is go to page 4 of your DISC profile and read it. Okay, and what you're going to do is hopefully it's printed. Put a check mark beside anything that's like you, an X beside anything that's not like you, and a question mark beside anything that you're unsure about. Then you're going to underline 3 statements that best describe you. Okay. And then I want you, once you read it, to think about, write down your percentage, like how closely does this align with who you see yourself to be? 80%, 100%, you know, write down your percentage. I'd love to hear what that is. Okay, now that we're done page 4, let's move on to page 5, and we're going to look at the priorities, your priorities of your DISC style. So you're going to see words around the outer edge of the circle. So that indicates your priorities. D's prioritize challenge, results, and action. I's prioritize action, enthusiasm, and collaboration. S's prioritize collaboration, support, and stability. And C's stability, accuracy, and challenge. You also may have lines like you see in this profile here that stretch into a 4th priority. How do you know how many priorities you have? Well, what you're going to do is you're going to look on the bottom of page 5. Okay. What priorities shape your workplace experience? And it's going to either list 3, 4, or 5 priorities. Most people have 3. Several people have 4. It's pretty rare that you have 5, but I've seen it before, just a little less uncommon. How many priorities should you have? As many as you have. Is there good or bad, right or wrong? Nope. However many priorities you have is perfect for your profile. Okay, so let's pause here, please, for a minute. Read through page 5. And again, all the instructions of what you need to do are on the left-hand side of the screen. All right, we're going on to page 6 now. This is really interesting because what this looks at are your motivators and stressors. This is one of my favorite pages in the DISC profile, actually, because what you realize is all of us have motivators and stressors in the workplace, and that's normal. But what's really interesting when you read this page is I want you to look at, so what does this mean for leadership? So for example, if you look at this sample chart here for someone who's an IS, giving unpleasant feedback is something that's stressful to them. So how does that relate to their leadership practice? Well, it means that that's something they're going to have to work on developing. That's a skill they're going to have to practice. You're going to have to practice. Okay, so let's pause here again, please. Read both these sections and just take note of anything particularly interesting for you. Okay. So we're going to move into action planning now. And what I want you to think about is what you need to dial up or dial down to be more effective. So as we go through your action plan, you are going to think about your strengths. Okay, you're going to go through page 4, 5, and 6 in your DISC profile and pull out your strengths. Okay, then I want you to go through page 4, 5, and 6 in your DISC profile and look at what are your weaknesses. Okay, we all have strengths and weaknesses. Nothing wrong with that. That's what being self-aware is all about, is recognizing that. Okay, now you're also going to look at how your strengths, when you overuse them, become weaknesses. So if you're a D and you're very direct, sometimes when you overuse, like being direct is terrific. People know what you're thinking and feeling, right? But when you're too direct and you overuse that, you can be seen as bossy or maybe rude. If you're an I, you tend to be very enthusiastic, which is wonderful. It's a great quality to have, but sometimes you can be over enthusiastic and irritate the people around you. So you may need to dial down your enthusiasm and dial up. I do that sometimes, your neutral tone. If you're a D, dial down your directness and maybe dial up your listening. If you're an S, S's tend to be very collaborative, which is terrific. Don't be too collaborative or you're not going to get your needs met. So sometimes you need to actually dial down your collaboration and dial up your assertiveness. If you're a C, for example, a strength you may overuse, an example could be being analytical, which is incredible skill to have because you're very detail oriented and really look at both sides of a problem so effectively. But when you get too detailed and too analytical, you go into analysis paralysis. So that's how that strength, when you overuse it, becomes a weakness. And so you need to dial down your analysis paralysis and dial up your decision making. Okay, so what I'm going to do here again is pause, and I want you to write your action plan. What are the strengths you bring to your role? And this can be found in your workbook. You can go to your workbook from the Learning Hub. It's an editable PDF, type right into it. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? That includes how your strengths are overused to become weaknesses. And then what do you need to dial up or dial down to be more effective? Okay, so now we have a really good understanding of who you are and your strengths that you bring to the table and your weaknesses. And now what we're going to look at is understanding other people. So we're going to look at how do you react to other styles and some styles that may be challenging for you and where you tend to have conflict with other styles. So page 7, let's get my little face over there to the right. Okay. So page 7, what I want you to do, again, we're going to pause here for a minute. I love page 7 because this page allows you to what we call people read. Identify, in other words, identify where other people, what other people's DISC profiles are if they haven't actually done the assessment, right? So you see these bubbles here. So the top one is active, fast-paced, assertive, dynamic, bold. The bottom one, thoughtful, calm, methodical, moderate, paced, and careful. So again, use that continuum. Are they more of the top bubble or the bottom bubble? Then are they more of the left bubble, do the next continuum, or the right bubble? And based on that, they're either D, I, S, or C. So I want you to look at the description that's cross quadrant from you. That is where we tend to have the most conflict in relationships with the person who's cross quadrant from us. Why? Well, because their work style is polar opposite to ours. So read the description, identify something good they bring to the table, that person who's opposite than you, because actually sometimes the opposite causes conflict, but sometimes that person with the opposite work style as you is the most fruitful relationship because you just see the world so differently and bring different skills and talents to the table. Okay, so again, let's pause here and take a minute to answer the questions on the left-hand side of the screen. All right, so we did talk about the fact that conflict is cross-quadrant, working effectively with others. So what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to think about a key relationship at work. One of your direct reports, maybe the person you report to, maybe someone on another team that you work with a lot. And I want you to identify what is their DISC. How are you going to do that? Remember, go back to page 7, use these bubbles. Where do they fall on the top continuum and where do they fall on the horizontal continuum? Okay, so that's how you're going to figure out where they are. So what's their DISC? What can you do to more effectively work with them, solve problems with them, and do when things get tense? You don't need to make this up. What you're going to do is you're going to, if they're a D, go to page 12. If they're an I, go to page 13. If they're an S, go to page 14. And if they're a C, go to page 15. Okay, so identify what their DISC style is, then go to page 12, 13, 14, or 15. Then you're going to go back to your workbook and you can type in your answers to these questions. Okay, so let's pause here while you do that. All right, and the last thing that we're going to look at is page 17 to 20. This is your personalized style index. So go to the back of your DISC profile, and if you're a D, you're going to be on page 17. So you'll see if you're a DC or a D or a DI, just a little more data and information for you to review about your work style. So Ds are going to be on page 17, Is page 18, S's page 19, and C's page 20. Any version of C, CS, C, or CD. And we are done our first module. So I hope that was helpful. Please email me if you have any more questions or if you have any questions about anything we did today. And thank you so much for your time.